lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. Episode number 208 of Sports Cards Live. It is Saturday night, December the 16th, 2023. My name is Jeremy Lee. I would like to thank everybody who tuned in last time, where we did a Just Jeremy, Just Me episode. A lot of fun. They always are. We'll try and do those once every couple months or so. Next Saturday, our guest on the show is Stephen Ho. He's got a great collection. He's been on before. We'll be welcoming Stephen back on the show tomorrow night on the channel. Josh Madigan from the Hockey Cards Gong Show joins me for our weekly PWCC Hockey Auction Watch Party. And on Monday night, Michael Hathaway from MC Sports Cards joins me for our weekly MC Mondays live show. Both are always a ton of fun, educational, and lots of action as well. Please join close to 500,000 people who have downloaded the Center Stage app on both iOS and Android for quick comps and card management features. Their app is the fastest and most accurate at card shows or at home to help you price your cards. You can build, organize, share your collection with your friends, and find other collectors to follow using their social sharing features. Marketplace features are coming soon. Check out their Instagram account, and please join me in supporting the great team and the innovation that they are undertaking at Center Stage. Also, use protection, practice safe swaps. VeriSwap is an app and middleman service that lets you securely trade your cards through the mail. Every transaction up to $1 million in value is fully insured by their guarantee. Check them out on iOS and Android. VeriSwap is now live in Canada and will be opening a Canadian hub very soon. They're offering $50 in free trade credit to anybody who uploads 10 hockey cards to their account. There is a referral link in the video description. I also want to shout out hobbynewsdaily.com. Check them out for daily hobby content. And I want to thank all partners, sponsors, and of course, loyal viewers and listeners for your ongoing support. If you're not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast, please take a moment and do so. And also, for the very first time tonight, Sports Cards Live is live streaming to Instagram. I don't know how it's going over there. I cannot see comments coming in from Instagram, but happy to be doing that for the first time tonight. All right, let's get to tonight's guest. He started in the hobby in 1988 when his grandparents, who would normally buy him a chocolate bar, bought him a pack of 1987-88 O-Pee-Chee hockey because he was enamored with that wax wrapper design. He's been active on Instagram since the beginning of the pandemic and started working at Mintink and LCS in Toronto in January 2023. His favorite teams are the St. Louis Blues and the Tampa Bay Rays. His favorite athletes of all time, Patrick Waugh, Vladislav Tretiak, Eddie Olczyk, Shane Corson, Jordan Binnington, and MMA fighters Andrei Orlovsky, Clay Guida, and the Korean Zombie. Originally and currently hailing from Toronto, Ontario, let's bring him out. Eitan Shapiro, the Sports Card Cartel. Welcome to Sports Cards Live. How you doing, buddy?
Jeremy, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I can hear you well. Yeah.
I had you hanging on a cliffhanger there, cartel style. I've got something for you, just for you, Jeremy, on this amazing, grandiose occasion. And it goes a little something like this. With the Mintink lid, don't gimme no megabid. Rocking with Jeremy Lee, the hobby MC. Have no fear. The cartel is here.
Welcome to Sports Cards Live, the cartel. It's good to have you. I mean, listen, you and I, we've known each other for a couple of years. We both set up at the Toronto Expo. You came to my networking event at the show this past November with our buddy Josh. And listen, it's good to have you on the show. I got to admit though, when I check out your story posts, they're so cryptic. I don't know that I'm interpreting your story posts the way you want them to be. Tell us a little bit about your approach to Instagram to kick this off. Then we're going to get into your hobby history a bit.
Well, that's definitely a part of the cartel allure is the weird subversive and subliminal messages that I put out there. And of course you're very astute. So you noticed that. A big part of what I do on Instagram. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not a big fan of social media. You won't find me on very many platforms, but Instagram is appealing because of the visual element. And what I also like about it is the audio element. A lot of people get at me regarding my musical selections. This is why I ask people to put on headphones to enhance their cartel experience. I'm out there to put out information in an entertaining way. I like to tread some of the paths that are a little bit more niche, to let people feel welcome in that sense and feel like they've got someone that is also into some of the more some of the smaller sports or some of the professional wrestling elements or other parts of the pop culture. You and I are both big collectors in that sense. So that's mostly what I'm trying to put out there, and just get people enjoying something a little different, thinking about it, dropping DMs, asking questions, or noticing something. I enjoy that. I very much enjoy that.
Right on. Right on. All right. So we're going to go to some comments. Welcome, everybody, to the show. Jake Dahl, Phil is here. What's going on? The professor. Dan says, a nice shirt to me. And I noticed Mitch here says, is this the first ever episode that I'm not wearing a t-shirt? I don't know if it is. I was at a holiday party this evening, and I was like, we ran out of there, came home, put the kid to bed, and here I am. I didn't even have time to change my shirt. Greg, snazzy shirt. Thank you guys for noticing. I do appreciate that. Chris, what's going on? Jerry, good to see you. Al, thanks for letting me know that the feed on Instagram is working again. First time we've ever streamed live to Instagram. And by the way, I assume that we as a hobby community are going to start to see more and more of that, as Instagram just enabled this like 2 days ago. So this is going to, I think we'll start to see more and more of this. And I plan to stream all my stuff onto Instagram as well. Like, why not, right? Great community over on Instagram. Mike Double V, what's going on? 90s hockey, hobby champs. I guess my question is, why is Cartel no longer with Coach Co? I mean, hey, people move on and do other things. I don't know, we'll get into that, but maybe we will. Mike, you bet. Slab City, welcome to the show. And Name is here as well. Eitan, let's jump in. I want to hear about, you told me the other day that you were one of the first sellers on eBay. Take us back, like for people that maybe weren't around in like the, 97, 98, 99, what do you remember from those days? And what did it mean for you, and continuing on now, building your hobby presence? What did being an early eBayer lead to for you?
By the way, Jeremy, I got to say, this is also very professional. The cartel's very impressed. I'm used to such substandard forms of communication. And I didn't know we were doing this Instagram thing for the first time. That's amazing. This is a milestone. And that's huge because Sports Cards Live is huge. Jeremy is huge. Jeremy, the interviewer who has been given so much praise by interviewers who right now are running unbelievably popular podcasts. I'm sure you know what I'm referring to there, Jeremy. You get kudos from the best of the best. So it's an honor to be here. Now, if I can remember what it is you just asked me, it had something to do with
eBay.
It had something to do with eBay. When you get me going on this, I get going on it. I generally don't talk about it too much because it certainly dates me. But I am an eBay trailblazer in the truest sense of the word. I like to tell people that my early purchasing, when it came to taking this a little bit beyond just a hobby, the buy, the sell, a bit more of a business. I bought a lot of slabs from a lot of early sellers, and people that were there at that time will remember luminaries such as Keith Olbermann selling a lot of sports cards. It was very early in a slab craze. The only thing you can really compare it to is what we're going through right now. I'm talking about the late 90s. And it literally was the Wild West. You could purchase used underwear from guys and girls on the eBay platform rather readily. Not that the cartel went there. I'm just letting you know what was on there. And there was a lot of competition in bidding, and also this concept that you had to trust in the process, because money orders and checks were getting mailed back and forth through Canada and the United States. Literally, my first sale was a money order that I received. So it was literally an education in banking, payments, and transactions. And a lot of people talk about how kids are getting into it these days and hopefully doing the right things and having a bit of an education in business that way. But it literally was, it was wild, because everything that we're seeing now, I'm so used to. People will be saying, well, certainly wasn't like this 6-7 years ago, but it was like this back in the late 90s. There was hot and heavy bidding on Mark McGwire slabbed rookie cards. There was hot and heavy reactions to Sammy Sosa's big season. There was prospecting going on. People were paying big money for prospects that were coming out in mass-produced sets as rookie cards. But we're talking about a very big era in baseball, and it was reflected on eBay. eBay was very lucky to be up and running in that era, and it just took off as the biggest platform, and I kind of got to watch it happen. So I have a great perspective on eBay, and I actually have this love-hate relationship with it. I do love it. There's so much I hate these days about, fees. Nobody likes fees. I don't have that much bad to say. The naysayers of eBay these days, I remind them, you can control your experience. Okay. The 90% of what I do is buy it now, best offer. You can set requirements for bidders, right? People sometimes don't know this and they get a bad experience, right? And people tend to talk about the bad experiences. The cartel shows up on those threads and defends eBay, because I do have an affinity for this amazing platform that changed the game.
Yeah.
Brought us to where we are today.
Tons of eyeballs on there for sure. I learned this recently, that eBay got its biggest sort of push at the beginning from Beanie Babies. And I think that, that's great. But I think it's like collectibles, sports cards, among some other things, that really carried it through some of those earlier years. And here we are today, and it's an absolute beast. Of course, I like Dan's Vintage here, says Instagram is going to expect a fancy shirt now for every show. They're not going to get it, Dan, but I appreciate that. Chris C, sellers are also unreasonable. Listing for $20 or best offer, non-auction gets an offer at $15, then seller gets offended. Yeah, I mean, hey, everybody's different, right? We it's hard to put your expectations on other people. MSG, welcome to the show. Chris, 90s hockey, the money order era. Yeah, lots of people making comments, like James Fertitta. I used to send cash in an envelope back in the day. Yeah, imagining money orders today. Hobby Champs remembers receiving checks for eBay sales, even cash. He started there in 2004. Bobby Burrell, the good old days of 80 watchers and 40 bids on items in the early eBay years. Yes. Jerry Hodge, proud member since 98. Hockey Cardboard got 500 USD cash in the mail. Like, no one's sending, very few people send cash in the mail anymore. Greg Cohn, I remember the old days of eBay business when I had my store in the mid to late 90s. Turbo Lister, that's right. And MSG bought his first hockey card in 99. Yeah, a long time ago. It's crazy what eBay has really done to really connect the hobby. And I think that a lot of that, Eitan, has to also gave rise to grading, because now all of a sudden you're buying cards from people across the world, sight unseen. Who's going to trust a seller to tell you what condition it is in? And that's what really, I believe, blew up the grading part of our industry. Let's move on. Instagram. Obviously, Instagram is a big community for the hobby. It's really grown in the past 5 or so years. When and why did you start your Instagram account?
By the way, I came this close to putting on a blazer, Jeremy, and we would have just been the spiffiest of all time. It's almost like I anticipated you were going to be gussied up for the cartel. So this is all for you. This is all for you. And it's better than a bathrobe. That also was in the mix. At a certain point, the bathrobe was in the mix. But there's always the danger of the bathrobe opening. Remind me again where we were at, Jeremy.
Instagram. I just want to know, like, we talked about it a bit earlier, how you approach your story posts, but tell us how we've heard now about how eBay helped you grow to where you are today. When did you join Instagram, and how has it helped you build your hobby persona, your hobby experience?
I was dragged kicking and screaming into Instagram, very resistant as I am to most new technology and trends out there. Cartel's kind of stuck in 1996, sort of. But again, I instantly saw the value in it, and I had enough people in my life telling me you have to do this. It's a visual platform that makes sense for cards and collectibles. A lot of people that visit the Casa de la Cartel notice that it is almost like a museum full of collectibles and interesting artifacts, all sorts of oddball items. And I was inspired by several accounts that I was sort of following before I did anything major. I wanted to kind of get a feel for what I wanted to do and how to do it by following some of those accounts. So I didn't just want to look at cards. I didn't want to see the typical. There are some beautiful, I mean, MSG's here with us. He runs a beautiful feed where he features cards, you know, individually and with amazing backdrops and fantastic production value that Cartel cannot comprehend with his 1990s brain. It's just not there yet. But I wanted to also incorporate the fact that, you know, I was becoming an old man that had missed out on how to truly use this technology. And I love music, like a lot. I have a huge record collection. I am a huge, as big of a music nerd as I am a collectibles nerd. And it was just being able to fuse that, have fun with it. I was having a lot of trouble with the way that we locked down in Canada mentally. And this was something that helped a lot. Not only was I connecting with the local community, again, bringing it back to MSG. He's out in California. I was connecting with people all over the world, and a lot of early content. Your show, I'm going to say it. The card porn page itself made it interesting and exciting. And then the last piece of it all, other than, you know, having something to do during the pandemic and enjoying showing off items and sharing music with people, you know, in addition to that, it was almost feeling a responsibility to get some information out, let people be privy to an eye that was critical in a healthy way, maybe sometimes not so healthy. I will cop to some of my early, some of my early overstepping. I will cop to that. But I wanted to give people information and help them because there were so many new people entering the hobby. It's the hobby that I love. I feel like you also know this. We have a responsibility as OGs to help people out when it comes to navigating what is actually a really complicated network system of a hobby. And to this day, and through the new digs, I continue to do that and make that a priority.
Before we get into the new digs, and I want to hear more about that, I want to get your thoughts and your personal experiences, just a little bit of how it's helped you, develop yourself again in the hobby. But setting up at card shows, I remember I knew you just through Instagram, and then I remember coming to your booth right beside Josh at the expo, and we chatted, and it was nice to see you and shake hands for the first time. And, and since then we've been friends. How has setting up at shows, what do you like about it? What, any like kind of non-conventional advice you would want to give people? Do you encourage setting up at shows? How has it helped you? Just speak a little bit about setting up at shows, if you don't mind.
I mean, shows themselves, such an important part of the experience in a community builder. That said, just the idea of, look, what are we doing? We're essentially running pop-up shops. You and I are, right? And you take your show on the road. You're all over North America doing that. And when I was a kid, it was like garage sales, right? And from there, a lot of the local businesses, when I was growing up, I would help them set up like at mall shows. And I just loved it. I loved the fast pace, all the people coming through, the wheeling and dealing, people bringing things in, just talking shop, like we're doing right now, is such a big element in all of this. It's definitely now taken on even more of an impact these days, post-pandemic era, because everything's growing, everything's so much bigger. I mean, it is so much bigger. If you and I are thinking back to even 2015, I like to think back to the 2015 show where they were debuting Series 1. And we thought that was big. And I mean, we've doubled from there, I would think. And
Well,
each show seems to be bigger and bigger.
and I even can remember when the double rookie class in 05-06 came out in hockey with Crosby and Ovechkin, and how pumped up the room was back then. That's 10 years before the 15-16 year, which is of course the McDavid year for those that don't know. So it's like the hobby kind of goes in these waves that followed these generational players when they come out. And now, of course, we've gotten hockey at least, and we're talking about the Expo in Toronto, which is easily the second biggest show in the world, and maybe some would argue the best show, because I know some people that come up from this States to the Expo and they think it's their favorite show overall. But listen, I'm a little biased. I call it my home show because it's not in my backyard. It's a 4-hour plane ride away for me, right. But it's still my home country. At least I do love it, and I hear what you're saying. That it's even back in 2015, it wasn't nearly as big as it is now. Obviously, the hobby's grown over the last 5 years quite a bit, but I'm with you. It's an integral part of the experience of being a hobbyist. And when I've in the past seen people say, you don't need to go to shows. Well, no, you don't need to. Of course you don't, but you're missing out if you don't. And I encourage it. People go to shows, regional, national, international, whatever it is. You're gonna do a lot of what some of these comments I'm gonna read in a moment we're speaking to Instagram, but they apply to going to shows as well. So let's get to some of those, and then we'll go on to our next topic. Jeff McMahon, welcome to the show. Matt says, happy holidays. Eitan, it was a pleasure to talk with you about 90s inserts. Cards AH, it's a slog to find positivity in the hobby sometimes, so appreciate what you both do. And here, MSG says, the journey of Instagram was fun. I found myself following pages of 90s hockey cards, and after hockey card pages kept popping up, my girlfriend had me create my own page and logo. That's great. But this is the comment right here. Instantly made awesome connections all over North America, Australia, which was simply amazing. You make these connections online. You also make them in person. And Eitan, I got to tell you, I can know you through Instagram because of your cartel brand and some DMs and maybe some back and forth in the comments. But until you meet somebody in person, you don't take it to that next level. And that's when the relationships, you shake hands for the first time. That's so much better to me than just DMs on social media. So that's why I think social media is great, but being in person, meeting each other, even better. Matthew here says IG has been wonderful in helping us connect like-minded collectors. No doubt about it, for sure. I don't know what this means. Jay says, is this part of the Iron Curtain surrounding the hobby, the gatekeeper? I don't know what Jay means about that. Do you?
We could talk about it. I mean, I'm assuming by gatekeeper, he's referring very specifically to something a quote unquote hobby influencer mentioned, in terms of, it's kind of like what I mentioned earlier, the responsibility of helping usher in, new entrants and expose them to a certain type of information, which is going to depend on the individual, right? Now, the Iron Curtain part, I'm not sure. Maybe they're talking about some sort of elitism. I'm not sure. It's maybe the concept of trying to keep the hobby difficult and mystical versus being just very open about it. And I think most people, that's what they want to see, rather than trying to make it seem exclusive. I'm assuming that's what they were talking about. But what I was going to follow up on in terms of what you're talking about with the connections, right? It's meeting the individual people. You are excellent at this. I mean, you've organized these get-togethers at the Expo for the past few years now. And you're excellent at giving attention to every individual and meeting people. You prioritize that. That's amazing. The cartel, it's a little difficult. The cartel is very manic. Anyone who's seen me at a show, I am going 1,000 miles an hour. I'm running on caffeine and all sorts of other stuff that you may not know about. You might not want to know about. You might not want your kids to know about when I'm dealing with them. But I'm always putting forth the best effort, the best face. I got to admit, there's a lot of DMs. There's meeting a lot of people. The wider I cast my net of stories, like you mentioned, of obscurity, the wider I cast that net, the more people I'm bringing in. And unfortunately, I fail many times at, recognizing people or being able to put 2 and 2 together. It's something I really want to work on. I hope people aren't hard on the cartel when I seem like I'm being ditzy although there is a bit of a ditzy element to me, but it's difficult, becomes difficult. You seem to manage it very well. That's inspirational to me. And also don't forget the content, like your content and certain other content. There's one page in particular that just so emphasized collecting and got me to think to myself during the pandemic, hey, what am I doing with this money? Because I keep wanting to do this thing that everyone's doing. I don't want to do it. What I really want to do is get a Gene Simmons rookie card in the highest grade possible. And that's what I did. And I'm proud of some of the moves I made at a time when things were crazy and there was so much competition. Other people wanted that Gene Simmons card that wouldn't have wanted it 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or maybe even right now. But I found the content inspirational too from people. Right. And like, you know, I became such good friends with Electric Cards that I entered some of his breaks, and I'm generally not a break guy. I'm all about the fact that breaks are necessary and important actually in the hobby at this point. But during the pandemic, it was a new concept, and a guy managed to get me, you know, going with something that I was initially backing away from, and it was a good experience. So it was amazing. It was an amazing time period for, like you said, meeting people, making those connections like MSG mentioned. This might as well be like Jeremy Lee, the Cartel, and MSG Collectibles, apparently. But yeah, you just wanted to expand on that and talk about, you know, the content and the community.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Lots of good stuff there. It is a really good community. And, you know, back to that gatekeeping comment, I think that where that comment that JH, and welcome to the show, Jay, says, is this part of the Iron Curtain surrounding the hobby, the gatekeeper? First of all, I don't think there is an Iron Curtain surrounding the hobby. I don't know if there are or not gatekeepers. I know that I try to be inclusive and, you know, welcome anybody who wants to be in the hobby to it. That's kind of been, I don't know, something that I think is important that we do if we want to see this hobby grow and continue to be a going concern for all of us and others. So, you know, be inclusive, you know, with people. If you know, if you're at a local trade night or you're at a card show or whatever, and there's somebody standing by themselves, there's somebody just kind of on their own who maybe they have some social anxiety, like just mosey on up to them and ask to look at their cards. Like just talk to people, make them feel like they're part of the community, because that's one thing that this hobby has that a lot of people can't find anywhere else, which is camaraderie. Because we all have sports cards in common. As much as we may not agree with each other, even like each other, that's fine. But people who are maybe a bit more reclusive, a bit more introverted, like, say hi to them. Welcome them into the hobby. Deep Value Investor says, I'm wearing sunglasses next time. This guy is great. Very good. Stick with Sam says hello to the Cartel.
Sam.
Cards AH. I appreciate the comment that the hobby is complex and intricate. There's so much to learn and understand, and sometimes I think there's not enough support to help people enter the hobby safely. And that's why you have to pick and choose what content you're consuming, podcasts you're listening to, YouTube channels you are subscribing to. And, you know, just learn by experience, I would say. Mitch says, as an American, I take one Expo over two Nationals. Mitch loves the Expo for sure. And here MSG is calling out several people, not calling out, I don't mean it like that. I mean, just mentioning a few people that they have met through the hobby. And I think that's awesome. Signed and Slabbed, who was a guest on the show just a few weeks ago. I met Cartel on IG, then I met him in person. And yeah, turns out we're twins. When you guys met in person, Eitan, was that at the National just this past year? Because I remember if it was, I then saw you both at that one networking event on the Saturday night, and I think we all took a picture together, and I got to meet you maybe early on when you first met Mr. Signed and Slabbed.
Yeah, we rocked out at the casino. Signed and Slabbed was a part of a conglomerate, I like to call it, because I just associate these gentlemen with one another. I was lucky enough to have breakfast with them, and at the same time be across from Pancake Analytics eating pancakes. This was a huge 2023 highlight, I will tell you that. But yes, Signed and Slabbed, we met for the first time at the National. It was awesome. That's a great example of like speaking to someone for such a long period of time, feeling like they're as much of a friend as someone who's in your city, and then you finally meet them, right? So that was awesome. He's a great guy. He's also a wealth of knowledge. Just quickly getting back, I might be remiss, Jeremy, if I don't talk a little bit more about this gatekeeper concept. And again, if I'm understanding what this gentleman said, I don't know if he was accusing us of being gatekeepers or something, but there are people that kind of self-proclaim themselves. They do. And oftentimes, and especially lately, a lot of the bigger names, when I say bigger names, these are people with large followings, whether they be organic. I'm proud of my organic following. You very much have an organic following as well, Jeremy. Whether they're organic or otherwise, they have a large following. They suddenly have a lot of influence, quote unquote, in that sense. And like I said, it's about the way that they're presenting the information, how they're presenting the information. Cartel, very early on in my Instagram journey, I was very much a pushback individual, which is to say highly critical, keeping an eye out for any instances where people drop the ball, because I took it so personally. I took it so personally that we were in a state, and it was a state of flux for the hobby. If we have eras, we just went through a massive era where our hobby grew, which is great for the most part. But it opened the door to a lot of misbehavior, I'll call it. We've all been through it. I don't need to start, going through each individual thing. I did find, however, that suddenly became like a cottage industry in the hobby, pushing back, and channels were popping up just to push back. You know what I'm talking about, Jeremy. I've appeared on some of these channels. I got a following with some of these people. I'm now on the outs with some of these people because it got so over the top and ridiculous and negative that it goes out the other end. You're suddenly now questioning everything. MSG put up a bunch of names there. I think, again, I'm not just picking on this person. It's just that he mentioned the name, but Mama Breaks is a wonderful individual. I've had nothing but good interactions with her on Instagram. She seems lovely. When it got to the point where people started finding issues with her and just digging for it, and it wasn't obvious on the surface, I said to myself, I'm hanging out with the wrong group, or not necessarily hanging out with, but being followed by the wrong group. Recognizing and showing off the good in the hobby and really talking about it and putting it out there front and center, but it's also about being aware. And when I say being aware, that doesn't mean going out and picking on every little thing, coming up with a theory on everything, like this such and such has a loaded box. When we're talking about a hobby that has a lot of randomization involved in it, on a shop level, I see the things happen that people say can only happen one way. People make these proclamations. So it's like I said, that's the summary, is to be aware of that sort of thing. Talk about it when it's appropriate. I'm gonna say some things people don't like to hear, or they may not have known, or I'm reminding you, like there's a run of Connor McDavid Future Watch autograph rookie cards by a certain grading company that rhymes with Kekit, and Kekit. I don't know what that is, but there's a whole run of those cards that are slabbed and have been known to be trimmed, right? And if you start picking on this thing and talking about it over and over again, I mean, it becomes a very negative thing for all of us, because something that kind of sullies the whole thing. But the fact is, that's an outlier. So we got to focus on the good, put it out in front, and be aware of certain things. If people ask questions, I want to be honest about it. But I want to be less about getting on every little thing, trying to find things. There's so many, it would be great if someone put together a reel, not only of all the bad things that happened. They shouldn't do that anyway, but if they want to, go for it. I mean, there are entities out there that do that. But how about putting a reel out of all the misconceptions, the assumptions, and the things that were not as they seemed? Because there's a lot of those as well. I don't have to start listing those either. But people will never cop to that. They don't want to go back to that, but I've seen it because the cartel, as an organization, I'm keeping an eye out, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, I hear what you're saying, and I think I like to highlight the positive in the hobby, but by that I just mean the people, like the people that are in the hobby that enjoy it for what it is, And at the same time, if you're aware of a run of certain cards that are maybe trimmed, it is important to let people know about them so that they're not left holding the bag. I want to go to a couple more comments, and then Leighton Sheldon from Vintage Breaks and Just Collect is going to join us for the Vintage Spotlight, which we do every Saturday night on the show. He's in the green room right now. Leighton, we'll bring you out in just a minute. Thank you for being here. Phil says there's a group of people who now look forward to Jack Astor's. That's where I hold my networking event at the Thursday Night Expo twice a year in person. All the way is a great way to do it. Hockey Cards Hangover says card shows are the most important part of our journey as hobbyists. I think that's an interesting comment. I'm not going to disagree with it. I see Leighton nodding his head in the back too. Jerry says there's so many different areas in the hobby. How can anyone claim to be a gatekeeper for everyone? And what I want to add to that comment is that our social media world, our Instagram community, the YouTube community, the Twitter community, as large as they are, they're not the whole hobby. Some people seem to think that the whole hobby lives on Instagram. Trust us when we tell you it does not. And I just know this from talking to people who are not on Instagram. There's plenty of people who are not on social media as much as we are, as much as some of us are. Jay says we were in a pump era. Now we are in a dump era. Great for buying. I mean, yeah, cards are cheaper now than they've been in several years. So it is definitely a good time to be buying relative to the past, but we cannot comment on what the future will hold. Phil wants to hear Cartel's opinion on some WWF e-cards. We will get to that a little bit later. Phil, Bobby Burrell, many of my best friends are people I've met in the hobby from the 90s to today. Same here, Bobby. That's a wonderful thing. Bobby's among them. I mean, Bobby is someone that I used to think, oh, Bobby's like this guy. He's written the books. He knows all about the vintage. Maybe one day I'll get to meet him. And now, I consider Bobby a friend, which is, just that's what the hobby does for you. I'm seeing these interesting notifications I've never seen before from Twitter saying people are joining. So anyone who's watching on Twitter, welcome to Sports Cards Live on Twitter. Appreciate having you. And again, we are live on Instagram for the very first time ever here on Sports Cards Live. A Collector's Dream Orlando, welcome to the show. Good to have you. And with that, let's bring out Leighton Sheldon for the Vintage Spotlight segment. Leighton, welcome to the show. Please meet Eitan. Eitan, please meet Leighton. How are you, Leighton?
Good. Thanks for having me, Jeremy. Nice to meet you, Eitan.
Nice to meet you too, Leighton. I'm sorry I don't have a poem for you as well, but maybe next time I'll have a poem prepared for you.
At least by the spring expo. That'll be good enough. I'll be up there.
Absolutely. There you go.
Eitan came with a poem for me, Leighton, and I got to tell you, he made me blush. All right, guys, welcome to the Vintage Spotlight segment with Leighton Sheldon. Just Collect Vintage Breaks. Check out his podcast, Trading Card Therapy. The doctor is in, as he likes to say, not to be confused with Trading Card Therapist. Completely different podcast. I just say that to be clear. Leighton, welcome to the show. And let's start off with this. I always ask our guest to come with a question for Leighton. Leighton, you consider yourself a professional baseball card treasure hunter. That's what I let our guests know. And with that, I asked Eitan to come with a question for you. Eitan, please lay your question on to Leighton.
I love that, by the way. I love that. What are we doing? We are pursuing treasures, especially in the overall collectibles realm. Jeremy is a treasure hunter, but if you are the baseball card hunter, you are the Mandalorian of baseball cards. I took a look. It's inspiring to me, actually. And I'm sure we're going to get back to Mintink at some point, Jeremy. But, a big part of what I have started doing with them and will be doing a lot of in 2024 is getting out there and actually hunting down vintage collections. Any collection, but we are kind of focusing on vintage in that sense. Leighton is obviously already doing the thing and successfully. This may be kind of for you. I don't know. This might be kind of a blasé question, but I love talking about grading, especially lately, because it's a conversation that keeps coming up. It comes up at shows. It comes up at the shop. As you are doing transaction and noticing, 90% of what you're dealing with are in these plastic encasements, it comes up a lot. So I've got an opinion on something. And before I even get into it, I want your opinion on it. So as someone who deals with vintage stuff, it's very important to get it graded, not only for grading purposes, but authentication, right? Protection, verifying things. How do you feel the grading companies are dealing with vintage? And when I say vintage, obviously, it's funny. Someone told me vintage is now 80s. And, I felt extremely old, obviously, but I also kind of laughed at it because in my mind, we're still talking mass production. But anyway, we're all old guys. What are we going to do? I would say like 69 and before. I just like to say 69. I'm going to say it again, 69. But before 69, that to me is probably what we're talking about when we say vintage. How do you feel grading companies, I just did a bunch of grading when it comes to 50s and 60s, are handling vintage cards in the post-pandemic era? Are you noticing anything, or am I making something out of nothing? And then I also want to know how you feel about the fact that AI grading is a concept now that we've sort of we've dove into as a hobby. Will that be relevant? Because one would think there should be a bit more of a human touch with vintage stuff, but will it be relevant? How can it be relevant? How can it fit in? There you go.
Well, I appreciate you, coming to the show with some questions. And as far as your own treasure hunting goes, I wish you the best of luck, and I'll see you out on the battlefield.
We may.
So anyway, joking aside, Eitan. So as far as grading in my own personal experience, and you showed some slabs just a minute ago. So as much as I handle a lot of graded cards, I really do handle probably even more ungraded. And so I feel like the question you're asking is a good one for me because I grade a lot of vintage cards, mainly for full transparency here, mainly with PSA and SGC. I have used some other services as well. And just to kind of get right to the point, I feel, and Nat, if you're listening, I'm happy to have a discussion with you, but you can look at my orders from PSA. You know what the scoop is. I feel that on high-end vintage, PSA has been, I'll say it like this, conservative. And the grading has been tight. And I feel that when I grade a vintage card with SGC, at least of late, of the higher end or even middle of the road, it is a little bit more consistent. And as someone who's going out and buying ungraded, I'm sure that all the folks who are listening to your show today can appreciate, all I really want is to be able to predict accurately so that if I buy a 1963 Topps Pete Rose and I think it's a 5, that it doesn't come back a 2. And to be fair, I'm also not expecting a 7. So that is what I think is going on with vintage grading with at least the two major companies that I deal with. And as far as AI goes, I hope that it works. I don't know much about AI, and I don't want to pretend that I do. I understand. I've heard, I'm familiar with Scott, who's in charge of the training at PSA and their program there. I've heard some of the rumblings, of course, at TAG, at Jeremy's company, about AI. And in general, I'm all for it. And folks sometimes are surprised. And for me, it's very simple. I want people to understand when they sell me cards what they have. And when people want to buy cards from me, I also want them to understand what they have. So to me, if you can get rid of some of that ambiguity and that uncertainty in the marketplace, I ultimately think it's going to be better for everybody, the end user, the consumer, the investor, the dealer, and it's going to make the entire card ecosystem better.
Right.
So I just want to say you confirmed my thoughts. You really did.
Let me just interject quickly because you mentioned TAG and you mentioned AI. I want to make, for anybody listening, I just want to clarify that TAG does not use AI. TAG uses.
I didn't realize that, Jeremy.
Yeah, and it's a common misconception. I just want to take the opportunity to clear it up with you in the audience. TAG uses what TAG refers to as automated grading versus AI grading. So I can't speak to what AI is going to bring to the hobby as far as grading either, but I can, have a better idea about what automated grading, computerized, automated, whatever you want to call it that way, grading does bring. So, AI is a whole other beast, is my understanding. I'm no expert when it comes to AI. We have the professor in the chat, and the professor works in AI in his day-to-day. So, follow the professor on Instagram to maybe learn a little bit more about that. Just a couple of quick comments here. Dan here says that he absolutely 100% agrees with Leighton and SGC's consistency. David, signed and slabbed, SGC was far more consistent, especially with pre-war in the green flip era. than PSA was. Good to hear they're still consistent. Now, to me, that's the most important thing when it comes to grading is consistency. And unfortunately, I haven't seen that to date. That's what I love about tag grading is it's consistent. That's the biggest thing that it brings. Well, I won't say it that way. That is something that tag certainly brings to the table, but tag doesn't do vintage, and we're talking about vintage right now. So let's go now to Leighton. Leighton, did you happen to come with any question you had for Eitan, for myself, anything, or if not, anything that you wanted to talk about from a vintage perspective?
Well, the first thing I wanted to ask Eitan really was about, it seems like you've been in the hobby for a while, and I've, always enjoyed the expo. And I think, Jeremy kind of sent me a little bit about your bio. You've kind of been, involved in a lot of different things with cards. And I'm just curious, purely from what I do and love, for both work as well as, I'm hoping to get some great things out of these treasure hunts for my collection. What's the coolest or the best collection you've ever had walk into your store that you've worked at, a shop that you've either just been at, meaning you didn't work there, or a convention that you were either at, working the table, etc.? Because I always love to hear those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It gets me thinking when you think of the amount of years and the amount of events and incidents, if they are an incident, there's a lot to rifle through. But there's a lot there, and a lot of what I saw and experienced, particularly in the mid to late 90s, is the stuff that's very mythological. And I like that as a cartel, because never forget, the cartel is an organization steeped in tradition and history and with eyes all over to stay on top of the prize. Now, I actually worked. When I say worked, I was a young kid helping out at several stores in the United States during certain summers. I was there when a near complete set of the first Imperial Tobacco hockey card set, which for me as a kid at the time, by the way, was like the unearthing of like the Holy Grail, or like some of those like an Indiana Jones type of treasure trove that didn't seem real until you had it in front of you. The way that it was acquired was unfortunate. I think that, again, if you think back to the 90s, guys, it was kind of a Wild West in the hobby scene. There was this boom. People became aware of cards because of things like the Griffey, or in our neck of the woods, the Brett Hull rookie card. But people started realizing there was some value, and individuals without a lot of knowledge started selling their cards. And again, I was just a kid at the time. I was not involved in the transaction, but the person who gave up that collection was elderly, and it did not go well. And quite frankly, that helped me gain perspective on the hobby as a young kid. But anyways, it got into the hands of a store. We can talk about ethics till we're blue in the face, but it fit the ethics of the time, I suppose. The individual did receive some money, but the reality is that the collection, which again was a near set, gorgeous, they actually went into GAI slabs at the time. I don't know if you guys remember.
No,
GAI.
I know GAI, sure.
Before there was an HGA in the pandemic era, there was a GAI in the first slab era. And it popped up in a lot of digests and collectors magazines, and it was amazing to be able to flip through them and be in their presence. As of late, working at the Mintink shop, we are putting more of an emphasis. A lot of people bring in individual cards. They want to do small deals, small trades, etc. And they also weren't aware that vintage is something that a card shop in the GTA would be interested in. You don't see it in the display cases. You just don't. We had a guy bring in a collection from spanning the 60s to the 80s, all OPG, but not just hockey. There was baseball included. And
I love OPG baseball, sure.
I'm sure Leighton knows, 60s OPG baseball is not everywhere. There was a Nolan Ryan rookie card, and it was fantastic. The gentleman it was a collection by a collector. And I love seeing those because it was carefully curated. Not all curators come to Canada and talk smack about our beloved expo. Some curators curate excellent collections intelligently, He kept the majority of it in binders. We came to a fair deal where everyone was happy. We took on a lot of work taking on a collection like that. It was about sorting through it, figuring out what was worth grading, figuring out what sets were worth keeping. Those old WHA sets, Jeremy, those don't pop up complete. We had great success with those. A lot of people thought that was just like, so you happen to get some extra WHA sets. No. That was some of our best success. And it was a ton of fun. I love collections like that. I love seeing it curated highly and loved. I would say those are that's the most recent one. And then, of course, that Imperial Tobacco experience was an old school one.
I appreciate you sharing me. You're tugging at my heartstrings there. I love vintage O-Pee-Chee baseball. I certainly know how tough and difficult it is to not only just find, but certainly to find in high grade. So I appreciate you sharing. Well,
listen, I have for you a 5-row mega box full of a lot of the quote unquote base / commons that are, as I call them, creamy and crispy, available at the Mintink shop. If you ever want to take a flip through, I've had some people make offers, and Leighton would appreciate. I'm not about to give up a 5-row of O-Pee-Chee baseball cards for a couple $100, but yeah.
Well, we'll try to work something out. I like that.
There we go.
You're gonna have to make your way up to Toronto, Leighton. Maybe for the next expo. Are you coming up to the next expo?
It's already on my calendar. I've already cleared, the runway. It doesn't matter if I plane, train, or automobile. I'm getting there, Jeremy.
Oh, that's awesome. Make sure you're there on Thursday. Come to my my networking event Thursday night.
I'll make sure I'm there for that.
Yeah, you got to be there for sure. All right. Well, hey, this was great. Great conversation between the two of you on the Vintage Spotlight segment. Saturday night's regular appearance by Leighton Sheldon, Vintage Breaks and Just Collect, his podcast, Trading Card Therapy. Leighton, anything you'd like to mention before you hop off?
So Jeremy, just clarify with me, next Saturday, are we going to do a show with it being, Christmas weekend? I didn't know if you're going to do that.
Good question. The answer is yes. It is the next Saturday is the 23rd. We have a show booked. Yeah, I have a guest booked and everything.
Great. So I'm just going to say this. It's the holiday season at my parents' house. I'm feeling very nostalgic. This is all where my baseball card love started. So what I'd like to do, we'll talk about it more, Jeremy, how to promote it, but it's very simple. I'm going to give away $500 to my Just Collect store. So it's personal. It's not, through Vintage Breaks. It's really not even through Just Collect. It's going to be me personally giving it. We're going to give this to one member of the community. And what they're going to be able to do, Jeremy, is they're going to be able to take $500 and they can use it towards any cards they want. So if they want to buy one graded card, great. If they want to buy a few cards, great. If they want to use that $500 to something a little bit more expensive, I'd be happy to oblige. But really, I'm just very appreciative and grateful that really after graduating college in 2000, when a baseball card industry certainly didn't exist the way it does today, that I'm able to, quote unquote, make a living doing this. Very happy to be here on the show, Jeremy. Awesome to meet you, Eitan, and looking forward to next Saturday. So if you want a chance to win, Jeremy, we could talk about it, but it's the least I could do for a community that I love.
Yeah, that's as Mike W says, very generous, Leighton. And before you go, I just want to mention, because we've got people watching on Instagram, we got people watching on Twitter, and I just want to let everybody know, if you want to be able to win that prize, that gift prize, whatever you want to call it, that Leighton just put up, you're going to have to watch on YouTube or on Facebook. This show streams to the Facebook page and the Facebook group because the comments will have to come in. You will enter during the episode of Sports Cards Live next Saturday night, and your comment will be your entry. That's the way we do giveaways here on the show. So be sure to come to the YouTube channel next Saturday to win during the Vintage Spotlight segment. Our guest is a gentleman by the name of Stephen Ho, and Leighton will join us at his usual time. Leighton, thanks so much. That was news to me, and I'm really grateful that you're offering that to our audience here, and that's wonderful. So thank you. Have a great week leading up to the Christmas weekend, and we'll talk to you this week.
Absolutely. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks, Leighton.
And Jeremy, I want to say that offer is void amongst cartels and organized crime, and also Quebec.
Yeah, not eligible in the province of Quebec, which is not true.
Sorry,
It is.
Quebec. No, Montreal, not even.
Not even. It will be though. It will be, but that's pretty funny. Okay. There's some comments I want to get to, but first I wanted to actually no, we're going to do the comments first, and then we're going to talk about what about Mintink and your experiences there and what Mintink is all about. Chris C here said cards went up too fast, too quickly. The hobby needed a gradual rise over time. It's a great time now, and collectors will benefit. I agree with that. I agree with everything that Chris C said right there. Bobby, you agree?
Absolutely. Chris C knows what he's talking about. There's a nice little summation, actually.
Yeah. Bobby says PSA has so many more graders today. The law of averages makes for more inconsistencies. And I think that that's reasonable. Like, I think that that's reasonable. And us as a hobby just have to understand and be cognizant of these effects of growth. Simple. And decentralization as they open up more offices. Colin Murray says PSA is overgrading. I feel that it is making it difficult to sell. He's pivoting to SGC. Interesting. Hobby Champs. I believe vintage is technically around 30 years. So plus 30 years ago at the minimum. I think the trading card hobby, we need to adapt an era terminology that our instinct to use the term vintage to only describe. Yeah, it's going to be hard to find consensus on that. I heard what you said, Eitan, and to me, I consider vintage, for me at least, up to 89. I'm not putting that on anybody else. I consider 80s vintage because it's just like the packs, the gum, the format of distribution was the same in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then the 90s, you've got foil wraps and you got new paper stock and you've got holograms. But listen, we don't need to get into that debate.
But wait, but Jeremy, let's use our big hobby brains and come up with a system like they have in comic books, where they have a golden age, a silver age, a bronze age, and a modern age. I'm sure we can find qualifiers.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy. I agree with Hobby Champs, and I agree with you, and I would like to find something other than just vintage, modern, ultra modern, because vintage is a moving target. And well, they're all moving targets, actually. Tim Larson, good to see you, Tim. Been a while, says, collect what makes you happy. I have a large group of sports cards and memorabilia, comic books, vintage signs, and old beer cans. I'm surrounded by them, and they all make me smile. Enjoy the ride. Great advice right there for sure. Great advice right there. David throws out the term pre-war to even predate vintage, which I think makes a lot of sense. Okay, Mintink, Eitan. Mintink is a LCS in the Toronto area. Tell us, when did you start working there? Why? How did you get the job? Take us through your journey to being there and what you're doing at the store now, what the experience has been like.
Well, I will do just that, Jeremy, but just a real quick response to Dave there. Dave, you are indeed my twin, but if we were to categorize one another, you would be pre-war, buddy. Now, anyway, let's talk a little bit, and I'm post-war, if you know what I mean. So Mintink is a trading card operation here in Ontario, multiple locations. I have an amazing origin story that I'd like to share right now. It may embarrass some people, but it's incredibly entertaining, so I'm going to go for it. But the way things started with Cartel and Mintink was rocky. I had decided to take a long walk one day. It was, I think, just post-lockdown, I'm pretty sure, from what I can recall. The last few years have been very hazy, Jeremy. Everything melts into itself. But I decided to take a walk, and I was almost kind of making a little jab and having a little light fun with a pattern I saw emerging amongst my friends on IG, where people were taking long walks for exercise, which I think is great, fantastic. As you know, Jeremy, I'm also a personal trainer, but they were doing this thing where they were all competing and how long they were walking and that sort of thing. So I was like, hey, the cartel doesn't always have to deadlift or squat. I'll go for a walk. And on a walk, I decided I was going to visit a store that I'd not visited before, despite it being fairly close to me. And I made sure to check Google, make sure they're open. And I was ready to, report on anything that I found, anything that I purchased, and plaster that, on my Instagram feed. But unfortunately, when I got there, I couldn't get there because there was no one at the store. And the lockdown and a variety of other things made Cartel a very testy boy at the time. All work and no play was making me feel like Jack Torrance. But I very hot-headedly went to town on Mintink for being closed when they claimed they were open. Now, I found out later on it was for more than a good reason that they happened to be closed for a small period of time, that the cartel happened to be walking by. And of course, any rational, sane human being would stop and consider that instead of turning their phone on and having fun with it and deriding someone set to their favorite music tunes, but that's what I did. And a man by the name of Johnny risked it all when he caught wind. He was having dinner with the wife. So our man, Johnny, risked it all and contacted me directly. He did not express any anger. He was not on the defensive or the offensive. He simply told me he wanted to spend some time talking with me. In that era of Instagram communication, where people are all over one another, all over companies, Tops did this, Upper Deck did this, PSA grades too slow, they grade too fast. This person, I'm going to punch him in the face, and that person, insert comments on facial hair or something. If it wasn't one thing, it was another thing. Everyone was on edge. Here was this guy, calm in the fire, and I'd really not experienced anything like that in terms of the communication at the time. Blew me away. I was very impressed. When I did eventually meet with John, they brought me into the store and opened up what seemed like a secret passageway. Like, I don't know if you've ever gone to like a washroom at a club in downtown Toronto. They're like exposed brick and very sketchy. You just hope you're going to get out in one piece. And they take me down there, and Johnny is a proud Italian fellow, and so are many of his friends. And I was being taken down into a cellar by these Italian gentlemen. And
I just
told
want
me
to
to take
talk
a
to you.
seat.
I just want to talk to you, he says.
Yeah, we just want to talk. Have a seat. Have a seat over there, as Chris Hansen says. We all took a seat, and what did Johnny do? Did he go off? Did he go into a rambling explanation? As an employee, John knows I'm prone to that sometimes. I'll go into a rambling explanation when I don't need to. No, he did none of that. He basically, if I'm going to boil it down, asked me what they could do better and for information. And instantly, I was drawn to not only being a customer. I mean, I'm a customer at a lot of different stores. I had also recently, by the way, I didn't mention in the story, I'd had a bad experience in Miami, Florida, with a group of young men. Again, it's not about hobby negativity, but I was fresh off of that. And the thing that Mintink shared in common with that organization was a very slick marketing exterior, which is very impressive, by the way, and comes from a lot of hard work. I don't know if you've ever heard the Mintink songs that John produced. They're fantastic. It's amazing hip hop. I'm a hip hop head. Anyone who follows my IG knows I'm all over the place with music, but I love old school hip hop. So does John. They're amazing. I'm really impressed. The extra mile they go with the marketing and the brand. So that was kind of a connection that had a negative connotation at the time for me. One conversation is all it took. A couple of proposals. A few more discussions, and the next thing I knew is I was involved in the organization. I'm involved on many different levels. I'm kind of more than anything at the moment a manager. I make sure the downtown Toronto gallery / shop is well maintained and running at full power. And it was amazing. As I'm sure you know, I found myself working with what I love for people that I respected and I like what they're doing. And beyond the passion, they actually have big goals. They have big plans, and that's very exciting. There's a lot of stagnation, not so much with Mintink. So that's the origin story. And at this point, I get a lot of experience on the storefront level at our Davenport location downtown, and that's relatively new to me. I've helped out at stores before, but this is kind of a bit of a higher level. There's a lot of personal ownership I take in terms of the store itself. It's a different aspect of the hobby, right? There's collecting, investing, buy and sell, this, that, and the other thing, but now, running a store and being involved in an organization that has all these different departments trying to make things work, a lot of moving parts. It's still in process. It's getting better every day. It's a relatively new company at the end of the day, and it's exciting.
Let me ask you this quick. So you're responsible for one of the stores. Are you, you mentioned you're also a personal trainer. Are you still a personal trainer? Do you still have clients there? And are you full-time at Mintink? Are you 40 hours a week type of thing plus at Mintink?
They were incredibly accommodating in terms of the transition. Don't forget, the personal training industry took a huge hit during the pandemic in terms of being able to see people in person. I remember I was on another podcast, Jeremy, not yours, where people made some judgments about me in terms of being a personal trainer, because I'm not really a meathead, but I'm a very hands-on strength and conditioning coach. I did strength and conditioning for some very high-level athletes. I don't need to toot my own horn, but it was very much hands-on. So this concept of, hey, don't worry about it, you can do it online, you can Zoom with your clients, it was brutal for me. It's just not what I do. I do have a few clients that mean the world to me that I've been seeing for so long that it makes sense to carry on. But I mean, that's 1/50th of the schedule that I had. I very much committed to Mintink at that point, and they were so very accommodating when it came to transitioning.
Okay. No, interesting. I want to talk a bit about, the title of this episode was Our Sports Card Collectors' Expectations Out of Wack. And I want you to lean into that a little bit now, if you don't mind, and just talking about what you're seeing in the store and what you're seeing as far as what you perceive to be the expectations of people in the hobby right now. We talk about, or you see people, some people love to say the hobby is dead. It's far from dead. Just go to a card show and you'll see that. But we hear people saying that Mintink has been expanding. You're bigger. You have more than one location. I'm not sure exactly, 2 or 3. Is it how many? 2 or 3?
Currently 2. 2
locations. I mean, that not many LCSs have more than one location. So 2 locations in the Toronto area. Talk a bit about, how that's been going, but also try to weave in your thoughts on just expectations that people in the hobby have. Are they reasonable? Are they unreasonable? And please, your thoughts on all that.
Well, it's interesting from my current perspective and the past year. It's been about a year I've been with Mint. Going into 2024, I am taking on some other. I'm putting on some other hats at the end of the day. I'm always putting on many different hats, but I will be out and about sourcing collections, consulting with people about their collections. We want to very much be a very accessible kind of one-stop type of service where people get the best experience possible, because the best experience is going to be personalized. The best experience is going to be honest and have integrity. And so that's really important in all of this. We are expanding, again, without getting into the details. We are expanding. We are partnered up with PSA, Golden. These are big names, and we are kind of the Canadian arm, so to speak. It's a big responsibility. And again, it came from reputation, and it will continue with reputation. Now, you talk about the expectations, and we are kind of currently in this wave of negativity. that's kind of coming alongside big changes in the hobby. Fanatics kind of becoming the big kind of leader in the hobby when it comes to manufacturing. And there's all this chatter, right? There's chatter about what's going on with breakers versus, the average guy. What's going on with grading? There always is this kind of predisposed negative mindset, like you feel like something is off and someone's trying to take advantage of you. This particularly can happen when you experiment with certain aspects of the hobby, when you find out your 1990s cards are not worth very much, right? That you had high hopes for. Or when you find out that grading is not as simple as just throwing anything. Look, in a respectful way, there's people out there that just are like, here's 10 cards. I didn't even look at them. Just let's get them graded. They come back 5s and 6s, and now it's a conspiracy theory, right? Not everything is a conspiracy theory here. And being at the storefront level, this past year, we have had monster hits, both with Breaks After Dark, which is the Mintink breaking division, so to speak, which they do live shows, IG, whatnot. And we've had monster hits in store. There's nothing more exciting. There's a business above us. I once spoke to some of the ladies above us, and they're just like, what's going on down there? Like, are you guys playing video games? Like, every once in a while, there's like screaming and a panic. And that's these monster hits that I get to see. So I get to see how everything is in reality, and that things are kind of balanced, and you have to manage expectations of what's going on. Not every box. If every box had a major hit, we would be in a very weird scenario, right? And what would value become like? How would you evaluate value in that sense? So I'm a big proponent of like, get really good at this. Like, ask questions, learn about grading. I graded with Beckett in 98, which I believe, Jeremy, was the first year they were grading. And before them, I'd graded with SGC, the 1 to 100 scale. I taught myself how to kind of recognize patterns, what the more important elements were. I educated myself on that so that I could even better manage my expectations. You have to decide what you really want to do in terms of the hobby. If you want to open boxes, go for it. But again, manage expectations and what the return may be. When you make purchases, I mean, it's ultimately as a result of the fact that we had the craziness of the pandemic era. A lot of people do have skewed expectations. They saw the wild price increases, right? So I'm always kind of the devil's advocate in that sense, letting people know that you can't just assume the worst. One of the conversations was about how it is when dealers and stores are purchasing items, right? Like these businesses that have an overhead versus what you're doing with your buddies at the after party, so to speak, right? It's kind of a different situation. But I cannot tell you, just as an example, how many times people have come in to sell something, and we're giving them a percentage. We're trying to be as fair as possible. The percentage goes up in terms of how in demand something is. Not once has someone walked away feeling like they were mistreated. In fact, I remember one incident in particular where a gentleman was just so thankful that we have a hobby where you can go, well, not down the street, but you can find a location and trade in your good, your actual asset for cash, just like that. And he almost broke into tears. He must have had a bill he needed to pay, right? Both parties benefited, obviously, right? A business is a business because they're making profit, hopefully. I don't need to tell people this. So much of what we do, like I said, is based on the interpersonal level. And if you give people that good experience, I think some of that negativity slips away, and it helps break the armor of this. So many people they're expecting the worst, right? Instead of just going into it with an open mind. If someone doesn't really know what they're doing, they don't have any experience, everything might seem like it could potentially be stacked against them, right? So we want to create an environment where there's community interplay, because that, like, the best thing I can do is get a bunch of people in a situation where they can talk with one another. I feel good. You know, in the store, on the store level, that we have regulars that, you know, one guy might know a lot about Pokemon, and there might be someone that comes in asking about Pokemon. They're going to get this awesome experience. I'm going to introduce them, and they're going to get this awesome experience from someone who actually isn't even a business. He's just a Pokemon fan and can help them. And then I can kind of get on top of that and guide them in terms of, here's what's available, here's how much it costs, give them an opinion on it. I really am fighting a battle at the front lines, is the way I see it.
Wow. Okay. Well, lots of stuff there. Appreciate you being so thoughtful in your response. I want to go to a comment from our friend David. Signed in Slab says, expectations of returns are still warped by the pandemic and the momentum freaks, but expectations for the producers are nowhere near high enough. It's an interesting viewpoint. And if I get what he's saying, I mean, you know, I got to think that I certainly agree with that. The second part, I certainly agree with, but we'll see what the future holds. You will see what the future holds. And we just saw this big promotion for these Tom Brady baseball cards by Fanatics, and say what you want about the gimmickiness of it or the gimmick of it all. That commercial was unbelievable. And that commercial, I mean, I was watching TV and I see the commercial. I'm like, this is, if I'm seeing it, what, you know, and I'm not watching hobby content, I know that millions of people are. And I think that's good. It's going to remind people of the hobby who maybe forgot about it. And they're going to go into a shop like Mintink or elsewhere, and they're going to buy a pack of cards, maybe or maybe not, to find a Tom Brady baseball card. But it doesn't even matter. It's going to bring people, I believe, into card shops. And that's a good thing. We had a question. Well, first I'll read Phil's question here. Says, I liked Ruben's comments last week. He's talking about Michael Rubin, the CEO of Fanatics. What's the point of distributors and third-party auditors is a good thing. I think super positive about that. I think that's a good comment there from our friend Phil. I want to say hello to Rage in the house. What's going on, Rage? Good to see you. And then Dan's Vintage Baseball has a specific question for you. Does Eitan have an opinion about Jeff Wilson's proposed 14,000 square foot Cards HQ hobby store opening in Atlanta at the end of January? And I don't think it's just proposed anymore. I think that this thing is going to open. I'm interested in the perspective of someone with contemporary experience in a card store environment. Now, before you answer this, Eitan, I would ask you, do you know what their plans are as far as utilizing 14,000 square feet? Because if you do, then I think you're qualified to answer. If you don't know how they're going to utilize 14,000 square feet, I don't know if you're qualified to answer. So please, what can you help us out with here?
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because you know, I'll put it out there. There's content I prioritize, and then I do miss some stories like this. I have heard about him opening a shop. I may be completely off base here, but I think the concept is to potentially even what's the term for it? Franchise it out potentially. I don't have all the information in terms of how they're going to use the space. I have a feeling that my opinion is going to be that I'm all for it, in the sense that if we're creating some sort of hobby-based experience, I don't know why I would particularly have a problem with it.
Yeah, no, I think your answer is fair. They've gone out and explained how they're going to utilize 14,000 square feet. I mean, that's probably 13,000 square feet bigger than many hobby shops out there. But
sounds like a hobby wonderland.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we'll just leave that question there, because unless you know what they're doing with that space, there's no point in really talking about it further here. I don't think at this point in time. Good evening to Chris from Rip and Wax, a former guest of the show, way back in time now. Chris, good to see you, buddy. Always entertaining. I like follow Chris on Instagram. If you're not, he's got a good outlook at Rip and Wax on Instagram. Bobby Burrell jumps in and says, the hobby is simple. Wake up every day to a treasure hunt, be informed, collect what you like, go to stores and shows, and share your hobby with others. Like, there's a mantra right there. Say that every morning when you wake up if you're a hobbyist, and I don't know that you can really go wrong from there. Yeah, good stuff, Bobby. All right, let's talk a bit about. Now, these are words in my notes. I don't really know where we're going with it, but the words are self-determination. And I know that means something to you, Eitan. Can you please enlighten myself and the audience as far as what you mean by that as it relates to our hobby?
It's about taking responsibility and being aware. Like I mentioned earlier, the concept of not being negative, not having any sort of feeling of that sort, but being aware and being responsible for your actions, whether it is on the level of a transaction that you make, whether it's on the level of an investment that you've made, that sort of thing. I think that a lot of complaining can just be supplanted by learning from some of these things. And I'm hearing this actually from a lot of people, particularly when it comes to investments that were made during the boom. I mean, I think February 2021 was pinpointed as the peak of the madness, so to speak.
I would say for me, it was just about a week earlier. It was the very end of January 2021. To me, it was the night that Golden Auction sold those 2 PSA 10 Jordan rookies for $720,000 each publicly. And then Ken Golden came on the show after that, and he told us here on Sports Cards Live that they also sold 2 privately that night as well. So 4 Jordan rookies sold that night, apparently for $720,000. So just to clarify, I think you're right. To me, it's like that end of January, because that then sparked a craze that went up a bit more probably, and then we've just seen the steady decline ever since. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right, but it's like it's stuff I said before on a previous podcast that I used to be on, which is that, like, if your base is being passionate about collecting, you're going to do really well if you want to start a business. John of Mintink, I really immediately got a sense for who he is in this whole grand scheme of things when I went into his office and he had a Paul Coffey rookie card on display, and G.I. Joe stuff that he loves. If you're a passionate collector, you're going to be successful if it's what you want to do as a pursuit, as a business pursuit. If you're passionate about it and you have knowledge about it, you're going to do really well with putting together your PC. So I love the people that come forward with questions and listen. That's important because some people don't listen. I can tell you a million stories. I can tell you a story of this past year about a gentleman who had an offer of $6,000 for a certain hockey card. I told him to take it based on all these great reasons. In one ear, out the other. God bless his heart. He ended up making maybe half of that down the line. And we actually helped him with that. But being open to not just listening to the advice, but taking it, applying it, right? And, figuring out how you want to piece together your hobby journey, because there's so many lanes. Some people just really love ripping. I like to do a little bit of it. Some people really like haggling and trading at shows. I like to do a little bit of that too. Some people like setting up at shows. I like to do a little bit of that too.
You wanted to talk a bit about charts, and even in this discussion, you just used the word investments were made, and there's a whole conversation amongst hobbyists and content creators about collecting versus investing, and we've all got our opinions on that. Charts have become a big part of the hobby story, and you mentioned something to me the other day about it. I'd like you to share your thoughts on sort of the proliferation that, you're scrolling Instagram now, Twitter, whatever social media you're on, you're even watching videos and people are talking about charts and the ups and downs of values in the hobby. And then you've got some people, like at the beginning of it, I was enamored by it. I was like, oh, this is super interesting. And then when cards started going down in value, I thought, I don't want to sit there and watch my cards go down in value. I just want to enjoy them for what they are. I'm not planning to sell them anyway.
Exactly.
Henceforth, I ended up selling a bunch, but circumstances change for all of us all the time. That's besides the point. But talk a bit about the advent of charts and all the attention put on them, and kind of where you think they fall, how they've impacted you in your perspective on the hobby.
It was certainly jarring as someone coming out of one era into what was going on in 2019, 2020, to see all these charts plastered all over social media, via Card Ladder and all these other different platforms. And my response early on was something I called the low-tech look, where I would literally hand draw a chart. That was my own little comment on, I'm going to put a dot here and a dot there based on for sales. And it makes this really weird amoeba-like shape. And there you go. Make of it what you will. But I just feel like, did this not reach its peak, Jeremy, when they started to essentially try to create indexes and kind of mirror, like stock exchanges and things like that. Well, and then that became a whole conversation.
Yeah. Listen, I hear you. I don't look at it as if they being the card ladders and the market movers of the world. I don't look at it like they try to mirror the stock market. I look at it as if they were inspired by, impacted by the way those asset classes are tracked. And they're a much different asset class. Sports cards, it's an alternative type of investment, if it's an investment at all to you. That's up to you to decide as an individual if these are investments to you or pure collectibles. As I've always said, we all fall somewhere in between the two extremes of extreme collector, extreme investor. Put yourself somewhere on that spectrum. It's going to be up to you. But listen, it's natural. It's natural for humans to want to find things to make analogies towards, to compare things. And it's just such an easy thing to compare. So I never looked at it like these are stocks. No, they're certainly not stocks. They're completely different than stocks. They're not businesses. They are collectibles. Yeah. And so I think that the proliferation of all of the charts and indices were more of a way to communicate to the audience, to the hobby, to the participants in this hobby, as to just what was going on with the secondary market values of these things. Because at the end of the day, we can say these are just collectibles. They're, I'd be happy if my collection went down to zero in value. Well, that's good for you. I can tell you, I wouldn't be happy about that. I've invested a lot of money. When I say invested, I mean deployed. I've put a lot of hard-earned money into these collectibles. I don't want them to go down to zero. I'm sure nobody really truly does. If you say that, I think you're, you might be lying to yourself, but that's besides the point. I guess what I'm trying to get at, just to sum this thought up, is that they are obviously not stocks or bonds or any. Are they a financial instrument? I think you can maybe make an argument that they somewhat are, because you can trade them for money, and then you can trade them. You can trade money for them and trade them back for money, and they do go up and down in value, but they behave completely differently than a stock does. And so applying traditional equity tools to the hobby, like the charts do, I think you have to take them with a grain of salt, and you have to really dive into them, especially the indices, which are made up of a hand-selected group of cards. And I'll tell you, like when I watch content of people who report on some of these movements, I'll say hockey's up 30 or whatever, basketball's down 30%, football's down 40%, and baseball's down 18%, hockey's down 5%. It's like, no, that's not the truth. That's not accurate. What is it? The accurate statement is these 50 cards in the aggregate are down, because 50 cards is a very small sample of a very large population, and it doesn't reflect the whole hobby or that whole sport in the hobby. And if you interpret it and consume that content as if it's true, as if it applies to all the cards, you're getting misinformation, and then you could make decisions that are based on misinformation, not incomplete information. And that's a bad thing. So it's really important for anybody who is relying on charts and indices, especially indices, to know what the specific list, what that mix of specific cards is. Thought?
Yeah, well, that's certainly where I was heading towards. Particularly,
sorry if I stole your thunder.
That's okay, but I was certainly, but just specifically, I mean, I agree with everything you said. Specifically, what you said about collectibles as an asset class or whatever. I was actually rustling in my mind before we even got on in terms of how I wanted to explain it as far as what a collectibles are. It's an organic kind of evolving thing. An example I can give you is like, take something that you don't often see. Let's say the 1979 Sportscaster Gretzky, which isn't even technically a hockey card. It's larger than a hockey card. If you try looking that up, you can do it right now. If you try looking it up at 130 point and you're looking at all the different grades, you will notice in the past 3 months, like a 7 went for less than a 6. It was all about the timing of when it became available. It's so scarce, right? So you cannot really apply that in that sense of, because sometimes it's not going to make sense. And if you want to start adding private deals, which is a whole other shebang, it gets even more complicated. We certainly do behave like investors sometimes, don't we, Jeremy? If we decide that, David Pasternak's going to have a huge year this year and we start accumulating, we're quote unquote investing. I told the story about the gentleman who traded his card in for cash and it seemed like a really big deal for him. We have that going on as well, but there's just so much involved in how it's kind of a living, breathing, organic thing. It's very different. So it's hard to apply it.
Yeah. I put out a post on my Instagram today, but I was actually took my kids to the local farmers market. They were playing in the play structure. I was sitting there and I had a thought, I basically said something to the effect of, find a card that you love that doesn't break the bank and that comes out maybe year after year with a big checklist. Narrow down that checklist, if it's a 300 card checklist or a 50 card checklist, narrow it down to, an amount that you can bang off every year and then collect those every year and collect those so that you're having ongoing activity, you're remaining involved, you have mail days on a regular basis while you are hunting for your big targets. And the reason why I bring this up in the context of what you just said is because the way I've always looked at investing is in the hobby is whenever I am deploying an amount of money that is significant to me, and this goes for anybody who's listening to what we're saying, that's up to you to decide. Whenever you are deploying an amount of money that is significant, however you want to define that, I think you are being irresponsible to your future, your family, your whoever, if you are not considering the financial implications, the potential of the ability to sell it down the road for at least what you paid, maybe more. Some people will say, I don't care. I just want the card. And that's fine. I mean, go for it. Like if you are happy to buy cardboard with the intention of, for significant money and maybe never recover that money, that's great. But then was it really significant money to you? That's why I think the word significant is important. And we are all going to define it differently based on our own financial situations. Whereas, versus buying cards with insignificant money to really satisfy that hobby itch. I do it all the time. I pick up cards for 12, 15, 18 bucks, insignificant money to me because I love them and they make me happy. But when I go spend $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 on a card, I don't do it as frivolously as I do when I buy a $12, $15, $18 card because I'm not so concerned about recovering that $12, $15, $18. But I have 2 kids. I'm going to want to help them with education. I'm going to want to do this and that for them down the road. And $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 today in 15 years invested in more traditional assets is going to grow to a bigger number that would help them in their future. So by spending $1,000 today on a frivolous expense, like the flavor of the month rookie in football or basketball might not be the best financial decision. So if you are not thinking financially when you're deploying significant money into the hobby, I think you're being irresponsible, and maybe you're just trying to form a narrative that, you know, is really going to nip you in the butt down the road. What do you think?
You are addressing very passionately something that goes back to the self-determination, self-responsibility element, playing within your means. I think some sense of that was lost during the pandemic era because it was so easy to make money, to flip a retail product. If you had an in at Walmart and you knew someone that would backdoor stuff to you, you're good to go. Cards were fluctuating so wildly and quickly, it was easy to make money. We're now back to where we were, where it's supposed to be, in my opinion, before all the madness. And what you're addressing is the fact that, and it goes back to expectations again as well, is that some people are playing beyond their means when it comes to sealed product. Some people are playing beyond their means in terms of the way that they're investing. I'm going to bring it up because I like to stir it up. And hockey collectors are going to maybe feel this resonating with them. But something that I noticed as of late is these gentlemen who were putting a lot of money into Alexander Ovechkin, smartly getting ahead of the fact that he may break Wayne's record, finding that because they're sitting on these items that they didn't have any really like good reason to spend the amount of money they did. They're realizing that hit that they're looking for, that may come down the line, may come down the line, is not here like a year later, and they're wanting to move it, and they're getting desperate to move it. So if you're looking for Ovechkin right now, as opposed to 6 months ago, as a buyer, you're in a much better position. I hate using that example, but I'm going to use it because I never saw something so stark. These people that were stacking realized, man, it's a few months later and I need cash, and I put it into Ovechkin. You didn't put it into a savings account. You put it into a guy and a player that is not having a good year so far, and the market's reacting to it. I know a lot of people don't want to hear this stuff, but again, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say really quickly that when Ovechkin's peak, we didn't know it at the time, but his peak was like last season when he was scoring goals, and the record was baked in. We talk about championships being baked in, whether it's Giannis or Luka or whoever. Ovechkin breaking Gretzky's all-time NHL goals record was baked into his prices last year. Now, as somebody mentioned, Hobby Champs mentioned this about 7 minutes ago, has Ovi hit a wall, 5 goals, 5% shooting percentage after 26 games, not looking good. It isn't. Way back, I thought he's not going to break Gretzky's record. Then I thought, well, he had a big season last year, 5 more seasons at 15 goals. He's going to, or whatever it takes, he's going to get there. Yeah. Now it's like, is he going to score 15 goals this season? I don't know. Like he's kind of right on the cusp of that. So yeah, anytime you are banking, just to come back to what you were saying, you are banking financially on a specific player, that goes against what any good investment advisor will tell you, which is to diversify. If you are putting all your money into any one player, I mean, LeBron James is a great example. I mean, LeBron and Kobe Bryant, another good. Michael Jordan's the one exception, maybe Gretzky, but even these guys have fluctuations. But I think you're long-term very safe. But LeBron James, I mean, 2 years ago, his cards were going bonkers, and now they've totally come down in value, which is probably a good thing long-term. Kobe has the helicopter crash, dies, the cards spike. It's been a steady decline since then. Yeah. Even Patrick Mahomes wins the Super Bowl, and then the cards go down in value. Now that was timed with the end of the pandemic and free money and all this. So there are more elements happening that are causing these things, more forces. But I hear what you're saying, and I am now concerned that Ovechkin won't break that record. I would like him to. I think it's good for the hobby if he does. At least short term, it's good for the hobby. And I'm not saying that because I have Ovi cards and I will sell them. I don't have many Ovechkin cards. The ones I do are in sets, and I won't sell them for a very long time. But in any event, I kind of jumped in on you. So if you wanted to pick up,
you got ahead of the cartel again, but that's all right because I want to add to it. I'll tell you how the cartel moves. You mentioned diversification. I mean, I've had people tell me I go just completely off the cliff with diversification, because I'm not just diversifying within the hockey hobby. I'm diversifying across sports and collectibles. I was collecting VHS tapes well before the big boom. I still have my favorite VHS tapes. I'm not into sealed VHS tapes. I'm into big box VHS tapes, horror movies, that sort of thing. I was doing that as a casual hobby. And the next thing I know, I have a buyer that always sees me at the expo. You wouldn't believe. I mean, regardless, the point is, yes, how does a cartel move? Diversification, and also enjoying what they do, taking pleasure in it. I know that's a little dark, but I take pleasure in this hobby in the sense that, like Jeremy said, I'm not leaving a show without something personal that always winds up being fairly cheap, right? Fairly insignificant. Someone might even say, what's the deal? My favorite thing is some people say, why are you grading this? Right? Because I find something beautiful and special in it, and I'm going to put it on display. That's why I'm grading it. Okay. And no, it doesn't have to be a 10. I love people talking about gem rates of their grading submissions. If you just, again, not to toot my own horn, but if you just want to play that game with modern cards, I have about an 80 to 90% gem rate. But sometimes you're submitting something, you know, it's not going to gem. My 1954 Parkhurst card, I'm not sending in because it's going to gem. Although I did get a very high grade on it. I'm very happy. But not Ken Dryden, though, as we found out on my feed. But yes, you don't want to put all the eggs in one basket unless, hey, if you're an Ovechkin guy, go for it. You should probably have played your cards differently in terms of when you purchased. Some people are going to be really hurt by it. They're hurting already right now because they didn't realize, oh, now I have to sit on this thing and there won't be this reaction. But look, I come out and tell people I want to help them. If there is a chart, if a baseball player gets called up, that's a peak in the chart. If Juan Soto gets traded to the Yankees, he could start off hot as hell at the beginning of next season. You probably still won't see the spike that just happened, right? And I talk openly with people about this so that they get it and they put it, you know, in their mind. Sorry if I'm a little shaky there. Minor earthquake in Toronto. And get people on the right track that way. What I was going to say is when someone asks me the classic question, what do I do? What do I buy? You can only imagine how often that happens in the store, right?
Yeah.
I ask them some questions because I want to lead them not just to the product, period. I want to lead them to something they'll enjoy. Someone might enjoy artifacts versus base cards, like Series 1, Series 2. Someone might enjoy acetate cards. They might think they look really cool. So I'll bring them over to ice or something like that, right? That's important. And like I said, the first experiences are so important for new entrants in the hobby. I want it to be good, and I want them to stick with the hobby.
I think what you're getting at is, you know, it's like if you are selling cars or you are selling clothes or you are selling investments or you're selling houses, you want to qualify your customer to put them in the right clothes, put them in the right car for them, put them in the right investments that have the right risk tolerance. And I think that if you apply that approach as a salesman, not a slimy salesman, but as a good salesman, yep, to your customers in Mintink or any other sports card shop out there, even if you're a pop-up shop vendor, as you said earlier, at card shows, like we all are when you set up a card show, if you take that time to learn about what they're going to like and help me, like even I've had a customer at a card show try to buy a card from me, and I've already kind of understood, and I said, that's not the card for you. I'm telling you, don't buy that card from me. Don't buy any. I don't have a card for you here. But, you know, Amit over there beside me, he's got something that's going to be better for you, for what you collect. And I love that way of approaching an LCS's role, is to qualify the customer. Yes, some people are going to come in, they're going to buy a box of this, a box of that, and you're just going to sell it to them. I get that, you know, especially because the way the business works, LCSs are stuck with so much modern junk wax that they have to sell, they have to blow it out in order to get allocation for the next stuff. It's such an interesting industry that way. Interesting was was too complimentary by me just there. But if you, and you know how that works, if you qualify your customers, that's going to set you and your shop apart, but because you care. You want to put them into the right product. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, it's kind of separate, but the same when it comes to buying, right? When someone's coming in to sell something, they're going to appreciate it when I can tell them a bunch of things about what they have. And in the case of if someone does already know what they have, showing them that I appreciate the fact that they were so passionate about it at one time, whether it was when they were a kid or whenever they put that collection together, and give them a great experience that way as well. Because you very well may wind up with someone who sticks in the hobby. They're not just selling off their collection. They want to see what's new. It's very different. They want to see what's new.
Yeah, no, for sure. We seem to just lost the cartel for a moment. Let's give him a moment to get back here. In the meantime, I'm going to go to a couple of comments here. First of all, Nick Martelli, welcome to the show. Good to see you. David Signed in Slab says, realistically, cards are not particularly liquid, and that illiquidity, even with graded cards, is a big part of why prices are volatile. They aren't commodities or stocks. And I think that's an interesting comment, David. The thing that I often find the most challenging, and I think other people must as well, is figuring out where and when is the best way to sell certain cards. Because, you know, I used to say that they are liquid because you could list them on eBay and get paid in 5 days. And to me, that was liquid. But maybe I misunderstood the definition of liquid and liquidity. To me, it just means, you know, easy in, easy out, easy to get out of them if and when you need to. And so look, the background, I'm sorry, I'm just in the middle of a thought here, but nice change. I'm responding right now, Eitan, to David's comment on the screen, talking about the nature to which sports cards have liquidity. And, but I do agree with this last comment. They aren't commodities or stocks. No, you can't sell them in an instant. I can go into my financial, my trading account, and I can sell a stock in 3 seconds. It's instant. As long as there's a buy order out there, which there are for most highly liquid stocks, you know, you're going to sell them right away. In the hobby, it's going to take a few days. And does that mean that they're not liquid? I don't know. I think they're close to liquid, but they may not be totally liquid. And again, to come back to the original thought, I sometimes do struggle to figure out, you know, here's a card. I want to max out when I sell this card because I only have one chance to sell it, and I maybe have owned it for 10 years. What's the best way to sell it? And there are many different ways that we can find to sell these cards. So, Eitan, anything resonate with you now that you jump back on?
It's never a cartel experience without technical difficulties. So you're getting the real authentic experience this time. No, I think you covered all the bases. I mean, there is that element. There is that element of liquidity in this if you have the right things, so to speak. And again, that just comes with experience. We hear that term used a lot, right? Some in a trade, someone be like, well, this one's more liquid than that one, et cetera, so on and so forth. And it's true. There's going to be different levels per product, per card. You know, like I said, a lot of like sealed product was practically liquid during the pandemic, right? But yes, it's very different than stocks, very different than things like that. I'm in agreement there.
You know, here, Timepiece Esquire. First of all, thank you for the tip. We appreciate that. He makes a comment here I want to touch. He says, illiquidity, you guys must not have heard of Burbank Sports Cards. They provide ultimate liquidity for cards every day. Well, yes, but there's a qualifier to that. You have to be on site, right? You have to be there. What percentage of the hobby is walking into Burbank Sports Cards or can walk into Burbank? For me, it's going to be an $800 flight. Well, that's that's a big expense. Maybe I need a hotel. Maybe I want to rent a car. I'm going to pay some Ubers. It's not liquid for me. It's liquid for people that are traveling there. And even then, you might wait 3 months to go there. So it's very liquid. If Burbank Sports Cards had locations in every major center, I would see it as being much more liquid. And I don't know, maybe Timepiece Esquire is being somewhat tongue-in-cheek here with this comment. I don't know. But in any event, and then David responds and says, they do that at market or a discount from market. And that's an interesting comment too, because it's understandable that they do it at a discount from market, because there's going to be transaction fees in everything that you do, including in most cases, trading your stocks and bonds on your trading account. There are transaction fees in just about everything that you do. So I have no issue with fees. I have no issue with a buyer buying it. Say, it just depends. Like, I always look at it like this. If I'm going to sell a card myself on eBay, I'm going to pay about 13% fees altogether. So do I mind getting 80%, maybe even 75% from an LCS like Burbank? Now I don't have to do any of the work. So it's only costing me maybe an extra 7 to 12%. It can add up. I get that, but you got to work out the value of your time. Not everybody has time to buy and sell online themselves, whether it's on eBay, on Whatnot, on any of these, massive platforms. Anything you want to add to that?
It may have been somewhat tongue-in-cheek, because technically speaking, you can make everything liquid very easily. Someone could come in and there actually have been instances where I've told someone, like, please don't let me pay what you're asking for this right now. Yeah. And they'll because I didn't want it at what it would have been fair. And there's a reason why I don't want it, right? We don't buy everything, but the person comes down so low because, presumably they're seeking cash, that I find myself in a position like, I really don't want to do this, but if you want me to do this, I'll do this. So technically speaking, everything's liquid if you come in at ridiculous pricing. Like,
but you know what?
That's what Dave's getting at.
Right. And yeah, Dave even says here, yes, it gets more liquid to lower the price. The other thing about that is, for the seller, the seller has to continue what they got in at. If I bought it for $10 and the going rate is 50, and Burbank or whoever offers me 40, and I don't have to do any of the work. So 40 being 80% of 80% of market, and I'm in for 10, and I'm going to make a 400% return, and they're going to make their end of it. Like, that might be okay for a lot of people. Timepiece Esquire jumps in with another tip and says, I go to Burbank Sports Cards every day, and they have hundreds of new cards every day. I've been there several times myself, Timepiece. I love going in there. Like, I've been in there twice in the same weekend, and it's like different cards each day. I hear you. They do a great job of turning over their inventory on a daily basis. And that's because they're known for the liquidity.
They're unique in that sense, because their owner is so hell-bent on having something available from every set. We've seen those reels on Instagram. It's stupendous. But man, I understand and comprehend the amount of work that takes and the amount of turnover. You need to be bringing stuff in. I think the closest you can get to an experience like that, and the level of being able to just show up and sell stuff, probably like a show. I mean, if you're at a show the size of the expo, you're going to probably find someone interested in purchasing your item, no matter how obscure or no matter how in demand or not in demand it is, right? So,
yeah. Well, okay. So David here says hobby transaction fees are some of the highest in any liquid market.
True.
And maybe they sort of should be, because I say that, well, I guess I have to get an understanding of every liquid market that David is thinking of. If we're thinking about stocks, well, I mean, these guys, these financial intermediaries are doing so many trades all the time that it's a volume game. More volume, the lower fees you need to make to pay the rent, pay the employees, and everything like that. Mike Double V says, when considering liquidity, you must also consider the time frame to sell. Stocks can be sold instantly. Cards can't. However, with online marketplaces like eBay, most cards can be sold in a week. Yeah, I think I said basically that exact thing a few minutes ago. I definitely think that makes a lot of sense. He goes on to say obscure cards may take longer to sell, 3 months or more. Yeah, you got to, unless you know them, some people are really good at just knowing what Facebook group to talk to sell in, what, when to list on what marketplace that, but some cards have a very small market, and that's going to be different. That's where I kind of like to talk about, commodity cards versus, well, I'll just call them less liquid card. To me, a commodity card is something that will sell pretty quick anytime you list it. Like, you will sell it eventually. You can start off at 99 cents and it's going to sell at auction, or you can sell it, or you can list it for a fair price and it's going to sell, especially if that fair price is lower than the most recent comps, because there are 4 comps a day on that specific card. Colin Murray says, go to any weekly show in Ontario. Lots of dealers buying. You don't have to go to Burbank. Yeah, that's a good point too. Card shows are moments of liquidity, because card shows are not 24/7 or the same hours that the stock market is open every day, right? So, but you also can't do it from the comfort of your own basement. You have to go to the show. You have to pay for parking. You have to pay for gas, and so on and so forth. And I'm just, trying to throw out all the different factors so we can all think about them. And finally, the professor says, I had positive experience with Burbank, and you do not have to accept their price. You can also speak for free to the card father, that is Rob Veris, and ask him questions worth that flight cost, in my opinion. Yeah, if you are looking for someone's opinion in specifically, you can definitely do that. Emails work too. I just want to quickly throw out there, want to welcome everybody who's watching on Instagram. This is the first time that we are live streaming the show to Instagram, as well as Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. So welcome to the Instagram people. I can see your comments, but I can't bring them onto the screen. It's a separate sort of thing. So Brendan Ryan, I see your comments. I appreciate them. Dan the Card Man, I see you there. Amber Zenith, what is going on? Good to see you. Lakers Exquisite. People have been coming in and out. Same with Twitter. Want to welcome people watching on Twitter. I can see who is joining. Pretty cool for the first time. All right, Eitan, back to you. We have about 2.5 minutes left, and then we're at the 2-hour mark. This went by a lot faster than you thought it would. What would you like to wrap up with?
Oh, boy. I quickly wanted to mention, you mentioned Brendan Ryan. I want that guy's account to grow. He does some interesting stuff. I believe we're both featured on Brendan Ryan's account, right? He makes these
I've had a few. I've had 3 or he's featured me on his hobby creator, his hobbyist car, custom cards.
Yeah.
He's done 3 or 4.
He doesn't tag anyone or use any hashtags, but that should be a bigger account. I like what he does.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
I think we covered a lot of the bases that I wanted to discuss with you. I think it's wonderful that we finally did this. I think it was overdue, Jeremy, especially being that we're a couple Canucks that have been around this long in the hobby. So I'm glad we were able to do this. I am very excited about the hobby. If you can't tell, I know you are. We always will be in a way, but at a time when there's a lot of people bemoaning prices or quality control of companies, which is a whole other thing as well. I like to stay positive because I love this stuff and I want that to be people's experience. And Mintink lets me do that through them as a vehicle in a sense. And I'm also able to do that on Instagram as well. Beer development and maintenance tips. It's a secret. Cartel secrets, my friend.
That is quite the beard.
And of course, we have to mention the Bo Bichette-like flow that Dave has. I'll give him that since I made the pre-war comment earlier.
Enough talk about all you guys with all the hair, okay?
Yeah, neither one of us wants to talk too much about that. But I hope you understand, Jeremy, that I hold you in high regard. That is very clearly evident, because UFC 296 is going on right now. Please, no spoilers from anyone. I'm so glad I can't see any chat or anything like that. The cartel's here rather than watching that. That's a big deal. I hope you appreciate that, Jeremy. I hope you remember that going down the line. I did want to very quickly, it kind of snuck in there earlier. I don't know if you noticed, but, I was previously on a podcast. Don't want to get too much into it. Someone asked a question. Check out my feed. I made a whole video about it. I was very snarky, even though I didn't want to be, and it'll give you information about that. But yes, there are people who were checking me out on a weekly basis. On to other things right now. It was a voluntary action to move on from that podcast. 2024, not only are big things happening with Mintink, partnered up with some major, fantastic organizations. We are all about the kids, just like the Wu-Tang Clan, so much like the Wu-Tang Clan. So many events that cater to families, kids, because we love the hobby. We want it to grow. We want people to have amazing experiences. You check out our reviews. We're very highly reviewed, well regarded. We're a part of the community, charity initiatives, you name it. It's just an amazing organization through and through. And again, I say that genuinely, unbiased. I know I'm wearing the hat, but if anyone knows the cartel, that there's not a lot of this that comes out when it comes to any particular organization. What's my favorite grading company? I always tell them I dislike them all the same. But anyway, we got to use them, and they are sending them back. That's a good thing. They actually send our cards back. Other than that, yes, the cartel will be on one or more podcasts in 2024. You will be experiencing a hockey card hangover in 2024 with myself, someone else we've also mentioned on this show, Jeremy. I don't want to overstep any lines or anything like that.
No, go for it. Listen, did you just leak the name of this podcast as Hockey Card Hangover?
I believe I did.
You did. I think I caught on to that.
I believe I did, and it may involve another gentleman who is taller than 6 foot, like myself, has a beard like myself. We share a lot of other weird things. I don't want to get too much into it, and I'm not saying that we're like.
It's okay. Yeah, just leave that.
I'm not trying to say that we've climbed the same mountains, but anyway. I'm really looking forward to that because I love that.
Onwards and upwards in 2024. The past is the past. We move forward. All we can do is move forward in life, in the hobby, and good. I'm looking forward to seeing what you have planned. Richie Rocket says 63 watchers. Let's hit the like button. I appreciate that, Richie. Yes, want to thank everybody for being here and joining the show. Bobby Burrell says, boss show tonight, Eitan and Jeremy. Thanks, boys. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Hobby Champs. David says, great job. Really enjoyed this one. Two of my favorite Canadians. Thank you, David, who was on a recent episode of the show. Eric, good to see you. Thank you very much. Mike, appreciate the comments. It's great in-depth conversation. MSG, good to have you here as well. Thank you to everybody who joined on Instagram for the very first time. This is my 493rd live stream in my hobby content creation career, and it is the first one that is ever streamed live on Instagram as well as the other platforms. So that's pretty cool. Thank you to Instagram for opening up, the live stream, the multi-stream technology. That is awesome. Welcome to everybody on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. We stream Sports Cards Live to about 8 or 9 different destinations, YouTube being the number one, the main hub for all of it. Thank you. Dan says, loving you have a guest with this kind of energy. Eitan is a credit to the hobby. Appreciate that, guys. That's it for tonight. Tomorrow night on the channel, the PWCC Weekly Hockey Auction Ending Watch Party with Josh Madigan of the Hockey Cards Gong Show. And Monday night, MC Mondays Live with Michael Hathaway. The Crystal Ball will be joining me for that episode. Tons of action. You don't want to miss it. We'll be streaming all of this to Instagram as long as people are watching. Eitan, say goodbye.
See y'all later, folks.
All right. And with that, this episode,
Mintink to the world.
This episode of Sports Cards Live is over.